8 containers filled with weapons and ammunition, possibly anti-aircraft systems, were found in Łaski, Poland. The containers, which had not been inspected or secured, were located on the premises of a local aeroplane sports club. The Minister of Defence, Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz, denied responsibility, as it turned out that the weapons and ammunition did not belong to the Polish army. Prosecutors have already launched an investigation into the matter. Łaski, Poland, a town right next to the Ukrainian border.
8 kontenerów z bronią przeciwlotniczą to nie jest mała walizka.
8 containers, that's more than just a small suitcase. 8 containers full of weapons and ammunition were found at a local airplane sports club. Shockingly, the equipment was not under the control of any authorities or by the military. The authorities are working on it. It is a matter that is known and is being analysed. Everything has been secured. Shortly after this comment was made, it turned out that the containers full of weapons did not belong to the Polish army. These are not Polish army weapons. I would like to make it that clear. It is good that authorities have secured the site and are taking action. All activities are being coordinated by the police, who will issue specific statements on the matter. Do you know how it got there? That is being investigated by the relevant services, the Internal Security Agency and the police. The Minister of Defence is thus shifting the blame away from himself. We are dealing with a clear crime, namely the abandonment of usable weapons that could have fallen into the hands of the enemy, terrorists or foreign agents. In short, the security of this country has been compromised. No Minister of Defence can claim that this is not his concern. This proves that the state is full of holes, which in my opinion is reason enough for the resignation of many officers and perhaps even the management of the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Administration, including Tomasz Siemioniak. According to a spokesman for the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Administration, a private company is responsible for the weapons stash. The company operates legally in Poland and has a license. According to the preliminary information I have, these weapons were probably supposed to leave Poland for Ukraine. However, the cargo was not secured. Nobody had it under control. The authorities also knew nothing about it until the incident. They don't care about the security of Polish citizens. That's why these weapons are floating around all over Poland with no control. And this situation only confirms that we have incompetent people in the government. We have people who do not care about our safety. According to unofficial information, the containers held anti-aircraft defense systems. The stash was not guarded, which is scandalous. Weapons of this type must be stored and guarded properly. These weapons do not belong to the Polish military. Weapons and ammunition that are uncontrolled pose a threat by default. The second possibility is that these weapons could be of illegal origin, and this is even more concerning because it is the role of security services to ensure the security of the country and to monitor such matters. The Przemysl Prosecutor's Office has already launched an investigation into the illegal possession and storage of weapons and ammunition. According to Ministry of Internal Affairs spokesman Jacek Dobrynski, the company had a license and was operating legally. The containers are being transported to a designated location. According to the findings so far, the weapons and ammunition secured by the Central Bureau of Investigation do not come from the Polish Army's stocks. Efforts are underway to determine their source and recipient. Activities are being carried out on site with the participation of experts from the Military Institute of Armament Technology. However, experts have no doubt that this is a massive failure on the part of Polish authorities and the Polish government. It looks very bad for the security of our country. The question is, what is happening in Poland under the rule of Tusk and Kosiniak if someone can find weapons in a place not intended for that purpose, with dramatic possible consequences for the security of Polish citizens? This is not the first such incident since Donald Tusk's coalition government took power. A year ago, at the beginning of July, in Mosty near Szczecin, not a private company, but the Polish military lost over 2 tons of explosives in the form of over 200 anti-tank mines. That's when their journey across Poland began. Via Goleniów, Szczecin, Poznań, Warsaw and Białystok, they ended up in Przemysl in Podlasie. There, after 11 days, they were found in the warehouse of a well-known furniture store chain. What's more, the mines lay on a railway station ramp for 5 days with no supervision. The management of the Ministry of National Defence took no responsibility. As can be seen from this case, which took place a year ago, no conclusions were drawn. And the conclusions are simple. Security services under Donald Tusk and his ministers are not in control of the situation in Poland. huge losses for Polish industry. The failure of one of the power lines at the Azoty Group has paralysed the production of propylene and polypropylene, key raw materials for entire sectors of the economy, from processing to automotive. It cannot be ruled out that the cause of the outage was overconfidence placed in renewable energy sources. For many recent years, attempts have been made to discourage Poland from Poland's sources of raw materials for the reason that the planet is on fire. That is, Poland's coal. There have been attempts to force us to close Turów and other processing units that are stable and replace them with unstable units that will disrupt the system. An anonymous letter from an Azoty Group employee has reached TV Republica's editorial office. In it, he writes bluntly about the progressive degradation of the company's production assets and deliberate actions that could cause damage to the company. Fertilizers are regularly imported into the ports of Szczecin and Świnoujście by German companies, largely of Russian origin. This not only hits domestic industry, but calls into question the sense of current economic policy, especially in the context of the war in Ukraine and the need for independence from raw materials from the East. This is a warning signal. The EU's Green Deal, which casts a pall over the economic development of the European economies, is also a problem. And this is what environmental protection looks like in reality. A ship with 3,000 cars burned off the coast of Alaska, including about 800 electric cars. It is practically impossible to extinguish until such a vehicle burns out completely, so it is a risk that the fire will spread and end up with very serious consequences, and perhaps also for the environment because it can end differently, and such a ship may well sink. I'm in favour of eco-solutions, but these are not exactly eco-solutions. And this is not the first such case. The supposedly eco-friendly solutions often turn out to be costly, risky and ineffective. An example? France, where the National Assembly abolished the so-called clean transport zones. It turned out that no visible improvement in air quality was observed. The example of France shows that all the arguments that were on the table that these decisions would improve air quality were not valid arguments, and all the fears that people would be excluded and divided into elites who have access to urban centres and the rest of the population because of France turned out to be real fears. Other countries are waking up. The Polish government continues to introduce a clean transportation zone that has been in place in Warsaw for nearly a year, and similar zones are soon to be established in other cities with populations of over 100,000. The Green Deal, while theoretically meant to protect the environment, in practice is becoming an instrument of profit for the elite and a cause of social stratification. Increasingly, ordinary people are paying for ideological ideas.
Płacą zwykli ludzie. Aleksandra Gołda, Republika.
Donald Trump is doing everything in his power to bring peace to Ukraine. But once again, he has learned that Vladimir Putin is not a credible negotiating partner. I just finished speaking by telephone with President Vladimir Putin of Russia. The call lasted approximately 1 hour and 25 minutes. We discussed the attack on Russia's docked airplanes by Ukraine, and also various other attacks that have been taking place by both sides. It was a good conversation, but not a conversation that will lead to immediate peace. Force could be more persuasive to the Kremlin than a diplomacy-only strategy. Therefore, in view of Russian crimes in Ukraine and the growing threat from China, which is threatening to invade Taiwan, the North Atlantic Alliance is changing its strategy and setting new, more ambitious goals. NATO is investing in cruise missiles, drones, and strengthening its air defense capabilities. Artillery will also receive substantial investment.
We have to invest in our air defense systems. We have to invest in our, let's say, long-range missiles. We have to invest in our maneuverable land formations, command and control systems. All of this has to happen. And these mean huge investments. We need all over NATO territory. And by the way, doing this will also equalize what we are spending with what the United States is spending. We, Canada and Europe, equalizing with the US. And we know this is important because we want a fairer NATO where all our allies spend the same.
NATO is playing with its cards on the table. It plans to increase its defense capabilities by 1/3. This means an increase in spending to 3.5% of GDP on defense and 1.5% on infrastructure, and it will apply to all member countries.
To be an alliance, you got to be more than flags. You got to be formations. You got to be more than conferences. You need to be combat-ready capabilities. So we're here to continue the work that President Trump started, which is a commitment to 5% defense spending across this alliance, which we think will happen, which we think has to happen.
For now, Polish President Andrzej Duda's idea of allocating 4% of GDP to defense is much more realistic, especially since there are many allies who are holding back, such as Germany, whose Bundeswehr is in a dismal state, as the German defense minister himself admits.
50,000 bis 60,000 Soldatinnen und
First,
Soldaten.
we need 50 to 60,000 more soldiers than we currently have. Only then will we start thinking about strengthening our combat capabilities. At the moment, this is impossible. We must first have the people, and then think about purchasing equipment. But, according to the Americans, there is no time to lose. NATO countries must produce more weapons and close ranks, because talks with Russia are not yielding results. And the threat, especially to countries on the eastern flank of the alliance, including Poland, is ever present. The decisions made at the summit of the North Atlantic Alliance are the result of 3 years of experience with full-scale war in Ukraine, but also the result of what is happening in the world. The Russians will only ever talk from a position of strength. That is why NATO member states must invest in defense. Tanks, fighter jets, warships, missile launchers, drones, air defense systems, soldiers and equipment, a protected eastern flank, and a well-trained army. This will ensure that Putin, or any other dictator, will not escalate conflict with NATO.
Karol Nawrocki's victory and Donald Tusk's defeat is not to the liking of many, from the Polish liberal left elites to Berlin, which for 30 years has consistently backed the leader of the civic platform. The reactions of our Western neighbors were not long in coming. The relatively unknown MEP Moritz Korner was left off the leash. The Polish government must now pass all the laws that will restore the rule of law in Poland. If the newly elected president blocks the necessary rule of law reforms with his veto, the European Union will have to freeze funds for Poland again. Ursula von der Leyen must make it clear that if the Poles want to continue their boycott policy, they will face continued sanctions. The blame, therefore, lies with the president. Moritz Korner is a second-rate politician whom almost no one has heard of before. He acts as a forerunner who tests the reactions to his words. MEP Arkadiusz Mularczyk responded to this shameful act. He reminded the German politician of the harm Germany had done to Poles.
I was shocked your yesterday tweets about Poland and sanctions about Poland. I have a souvenir for you. This is a very important book about the Second World War. You should read this book about what Germans make in Poland.
I think that has nothing to do with what
I think yes.
No.
I think yes.
No, absolutely not.
If you try to lecture us, you should see what Germany made in Poland during the Second World War, and you never pay for that. So please read this book and be more smart in the future. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
As a result of the genocidal activities of the German state during World War II, 6 million Polish citizens were killed. Warsaw was reduced to rubble, and the economy ceased to exist, according to a report by the Institute of War Losses. Poland is owed over 6 trillion zloty in reparations. Germany does not want to pay us a single zloty, and now they are demanding sanctions against us. The consequences of the war for Poland are dramatic. Germany has never fulfilled its financial obligations, never paid Poland war reparations or compensation. To this day, the victims of World War II in Poland have no legal recourse. Germany also has no moral right to lecture Poles about the rule of law. On the contrary, they are debtors to Poland and Poles. Berlin understands that Rafał Trzaskowski's defeat signals the possible collapse of Donald Tusk's government, so they are returning to their old tried and tested methods. When Law and Justice was in power last time, the Brussels elites unlawfully deprived Poland of European funds. This policy is symbolized by the statement of the German Vice President of the European Parliament, Katarina Barley. Countries such as Poland and Hungary must be starved financially. And although German radio later tried to convince people that such words were not spoken, that they had been manipulated and taken out of context, further actions against both countries were in line with the meaning of this statement. And just as the German politician said, so it happened. Poland's payment from the National Recovery Plan was blocked. It is not as Adam Bodnar said, that we are a pet tamed by Germany. The pet has become predatory. The pet says we are an independent nation, and you have gone too far with this pet. In view of such insolent behavior on the part of the Germans, the Polish state must pursue a strong and courageous policy. It is the government's duty to at least demand the payment of war reparations. Unfortunately, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk is not even trying to address this issue. In a formal, legal, and international sense, the issue of reparations was closed many years ago. Germany is pushing illegal migrants across our border, whom they cannot cope with. In addition, the Brussels elites under German leadership are imposing a migration pact on member states, which is praised by Donald Tusk. Poland will be a beneficiary of the migration pact. The words of the German MEP show how Brussels and Germany will treat any government pursuing Polish interests. Therefore, conservative politicians in Poland must have a plan to fight this. First, reparations. Second, defense against illegal immigrants.
Jako obywatelski kandydat na prezydenta Rzeczpospolitej Polskiej.
As a citizen's candidate for the Polish presidency, as the future president of Poland, I guarantee you that I am in favor of unilaterally terminating the migration pact. And on issues as important as our security, such as the issue of illegal migration to Poland, we are all waiting for a national citizens' referendum on illegal migration to be held. In addition, the pro-Polish government in Warsaw should challenge the EU's ETS and ETS2 programs, which are forcing Poland to give up coal, which is already increasing our energy prices. And while we are being forced to close mines, Germany is opening up its own. Today, the European Union is simply a hypocritical union, a union of lies, where there are no equal standards, where there are double standards, and we must fight against this. I think that today many European Union countries see this, and Polish citizens see it too. When Germany does not like the democratic will of the Polish people, it tries to impose sanctions on us. And when their allies win the elections, the problems with the alleged lack of the rule of law disappear. However, we already know this scenario by heart.